to come off camera if possible, just to show us your face. You can stay muted. We won't force you to talk unless you would like to. Great. Okay. So let's begin. So welcome, Deborah. Welcome, Hannah, Michelle, Farrow. Our time together, everyone, will be about 45 minutes. And so what we're going to do is have about 30 minutes of speaking, and I invite everyone to put questions in the chat during those 30 minutes. And then we'll have a nice open question and answer period after the 30 minutes. And then authors are welcome to stay on for the last 15 if you want to just have a little social time with each other. So without further ado, I am extremely thrilled to meet several of our authors for the first time for me. And as you can tell, the book has just come off the press from Routledge. And virtual art therapy is a work in progress. We sent it to press about 9 months ago, so Routledge did a good job. Thanks to Routledge for this. And also, as you will see, maybe Sharona, you can hold up the book. We have many color plates, so we bargained for that. And with virtual art therapy, of course, color is really important. So we were able to get quite a few more plates than normal. So that's exciting. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each author to spend about 2 minutes introducing yourself. Even those of you who co-wrote, you can each please speak a little bit about yourselves and about the key themes or findings in your chapter to orient the audience, many of whom have not seen the book or read it yet since it's so fresh. And I am Michele Winkel, the Clinical Director of CiiAT and the editor of this book, with lots of help from my support team, including Crystal Bodenbender, who is here today, and Melissa Yu, who's working elsewhere today. I'm proud to be on the Lekwungen People's Land in Victoria, BC, and grateful for this place that I live, and also grateful to have all of you from across North America and some from across the oceans in Asia and Europe. Okay, any author feeling like starting? Michele Rattigan, thank you.
Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Let's please do.
Because you know what, that's what COVID really felt like, especially teaching. And the title, well, let me introduce myself first. My name is Michele Rattigan. I use the pronoun she, her. And I am currently in South Jersey in the United States, speaking to you from the lands of the Lenni Lenape peoples. And I teach in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at Drexel University. Actually graduated from that program in art therapy back in 1996. And a few years after graduating, started adjuncting, and I never left. I liked education and I loved that program so much. And a couple of years ago, I became a student again, and now I'm getting my doctorate in health sciences. And I am studying critical compassionate pedagogy and cultural humility in the clinical education and the nursing and health professions. So if anyone's interested in being a participant in my dissertation, if you are a clinical educator, be on the lookout for an email in about a year or two. That's my plug. So my chapter was conveniently called Cameras Off, Coffee On. And the reason why, interestingly, I had a son in college, a daughter in high school, and a daughter in middle school. And we were all learning and teaching and working from home at the same time when COVID hit the East Coast in March. And for us at the time, it was basically, you have a week to get your act together and put everything online. We are an accredited program. We're accredited to be in person and not online. And while Drexel itself is a school that has been doing online programming for a really long time with a lot of support, our college in the nursing and health professions did not historically have the parameters in place and the support for the teachers to be able to make that shift. I fortunately had taken Essentials in Online Learning and Teaching course before COVID hit. So it felt like, and I was also learning as a doctoral student online. So those two things were perfect timing for me to really kind of dip back and say, okay, how can I meet the students where they are? Because the university in crisis mode, right? It was an emergency pivot for all of us, said, we'll just teach your classes as if you're teaching in person, which means everyone's on camera. If you have a 3-hour class, it's a 3-hour Zoom meeting and everyone has to be there with their cameras on. And I thought, are you kidding me? So I am someone who always follows the rules. I was raised very Catholic, Polish American, and I really felt like I had to go to penance after all of this, but I bucked the rules. And I said, we're not going to do this. And I co-created the class with the students with this idea that we are co-collaborators, co-conspirators. We are a neighborhood of learners. I really leaned into anti-oppressive practices, looking at people outside of the art therapy world, educators such as Amy Whiteside, who had a lot of really great information about Mr. Rogers, if anyone remembers Mr. Rogers, neighborhood, and just really meeting people where they are. And we decided that we were going to make our synchronous time not mandatory. So I used the skills that I learned and I built really robust asynchronous experiences. They didn't have access to a studio, and Drexel had cut off funding for art supplies because everyone was cutting off funding for everything. No one knew how long this pandemic was going to be. So I had a community fundraiser and people were donating used and brand new art supplies. And I personally financed them and shipped them to wherever the students had landed across the United States. We didn't have anyone international at the time in the program. So I had shipped out these boxes so everyone had something to use. And so we met for an hour and a half synchronously instead of 3 hours. Didn't have to have their cameras on, but everyone had to have at least coffee or tea or water. And we just made art together and we just let it be organic. We talked about readings. We talked about clinical experiences that I had that tied to what they were learning in the pre-recorded lectures that I had made and the robust asynchronous activities. Pets made frequent experiences. We talked about what was happening in the world. Systemic racism was really coming to a head, and people needed to talk about that and how they were scared about going to their clinical sites if they were still able to go into their clinical sites, and how were they going to talk to their clients and their art therapy participants. Someone gave us a tutorial on how to make pigment out of an avocado pit. And one of the things that the students shared was that that was their favorite class because they felt like they weren't invisible. They felt like it was a space where they could still learn. They didn't feel like things were being compromised in their rigor, and they can do it in a pace that felt right in a time where nothing else felt right. And so for me, that really changed the way I was going to teach forever. That it was important for me to not try to get everything in, to force every little nugget, and that I can slow down and I can be with them and know that we're going to get there. I can go on forever to talk about this, but it was just such a really lovely experience. And I hope I get to talk to you more about it when we have our Q&A, but I don't want to take time away from the other authors. So thank you so much for letting me rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes.
I got us started, and we'll go to the next author.
Thank you, Michele. That was inspiring. And as I grew up with Mr. Rogers, I think that focus on relationship was really important. And obviously your students were really blessed to have your maturity and your wisdom and your experience teaching and being able to focus on that piece and not being stuck in the so-called curriculum. Thank you. So may I ask Carolyn to go next? Are you in the mood, Carolyn?
Sure.
Great.
Okay, so I co-authored the Evolution of a Virtual Art Therapy Open Studio with Dr. Sheila Lorenzo de la Peña. And I am currently the program director at Edinburgh University's Graduate Art Therapy program, and we are completely online. So the pivot that most programs had to undertake when COVID hit was our normal. The way we shifted and the evolution of our virtual open studio was, although we're a virtual program, we do have a campus presence. And when our program began in 2014, part of that was trying to build a sense of community within the students and the faculty and the staff at Edinburgh University, along with the community that we reside in. And we had a campus-based open studio that ran 2 days a week, where individuals were invited to come and just create. And it didn't matter if you felt you were artistic, if you were Dr. Treadon, or you were just Carolyn. Everybody was equal in the space. As we evolved in our online presence, March 14th, I think, is a day most of us will never forget, when everything shut. And our faculty came together on the 15th and said, okay, how are we going to handle this? Well, we know how to do online, and we know how to run a studio. So let's take the studio online and see what happens. And each faculty took a day, and for 2 hours every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we hosted an open studio. It was a space for people just to come. It wasn't group therapy, it was collective decompression, it was creativity, where we had a prompt, and if you felt like following it, wonderful. If you didn't, just come and coexist in the space with us. And we had individuals come in who played music while we created, because music was their art form. And individuals who would bring their fiber arts and say, you know, I just want to feel connected. What happened from that is, although things have resumed some sense of normalcy, our virtual studio has never gone away. Our campus-based face-to-face has returned with precaution, but we found this was a necessary way for people to connect, and it has become a global community, which has been really exciting for us. And I'm going to hand my 2 minutes over to Dr. Lorenzo de la Peña to talk about her perception. She is our faculty supervisor for the Open Studio.
Thank you very much, Carolyn.
Hey. Okay, I guess it's my turn. Hi.
Go for it, Sheila. Thank you.
Sheila Lorenzo de la Peña, a faculty in the program with Carolyn, and I'm on the ground. So I supervise the studio that we have in-house, and then also the students who now are leading the online studio, we call it online virtual studio, just to like double dip on that. And a lot of the content that we put into the chapter came from our everyday learning, our weekly learning, like every time there's a studio. And I dare say last semester, we basically had a studio running, at least one studio every day of the week, except for like Sundays, because nobody wanted to do that. But outside of Sunday, there was basically one virtual studio happening every day. And there were people attending, because I usually start the semester with, if nobody attends, let's shut it down. There's always individuals interested. Like Carolyn said, our studios are now open in the sense that anyone can attend. We encourage individuals who are not students. At the very beginning, we even encourage spouses, like, who's in the house stuck in there with you? Bring them. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to isolate yourself, open the door. And that's, I remember Carolyn, the husband was someone that brought the guitar, and they were just playing in the background because they're like, I'm not artsy. I'm like, you play guitar, bring it. Same way, at this point, a couple of years out from that, the lessons we've learned, we're now building into my like supervision with the studio leads. And that's very much the chart that's in our chapter about how they need to think of the studio space, how they can even build from it and bring their own energies And every one of our student leads brings their very own energy. And by the second or third studio that they run or participate in, they're able to go like, oh, I want to put candles in my background. I want to have this kind of music versus that one. I want to theme each of my studios so that they reach a different population or a different need that I hear in my community. And I'm like, go for it. Make it what fits your character, your needs, again, your community, because that's what's important. You need to kind of meld with the space. You know, just because it's virtual, just because it's out there, doesn't mean that you have to fit my model of what I expect. So let's have conversations, and I'm flexible to have it change every semester with every new class of bleeding students. We've learned also that it's important to have the conversations about safety, because it's online and we all know that there's things that happen. Unfortunately, there's folks that are totally bored out of their minds and they like to be annoying. And so we have those conversations all the time. We have them at the beginning before they even become a studio lead. And how do you take control of a space like this if something were to happen? How do you boot people off so that they can't come back? How do you then process that, you know, what happened with whoever's there? Because you're going to have that, like, that anxiety reaction and response, and it's going to sit in their body. And now what you had planned is out the window. So let's come back to center. Let's de-stress. And all that stuff. I don't know. It's like everything else in the chapter.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Dr. Lorenzo de la Peña. Okay, it is a fascinating chapter. I really enjoyed being part of that. I'm going to go to the Loyola Marymount duo, the dynamic duo, Jessica and Amber. Let's spotlight Jessica. Would you like to start, and or would you? Okay, great.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you, to meet you. And thank you so much, Michelle, for inviting us to contribute. It's really an honor, a privilege. We're really, well, I don't want to speak for Amber, but I'm pretty sure she's excited as well. My name is Dr. Jessica Bianchi, pronouns she and her. And as Michelle said, I work at LMU. I am a faculty. I'm a professor in our department, and part of my job is also to direct our Helen B. Landgarden Art Therapy Clinic. It's kind of like the outreach branch of our department. And so right before COVID, I was hired about 3 years ago. I started my first semester as a full-time faculty, and then COVID hit. All of our services were in person through the clinic, and we very quickly had to transition to teaching online, providing our services online. So it was quite a feat, but I have a wonderful team. I'm so grateful for them. Through our clinic, we facilitate a lot of different services all across Los Angeles, mainly to folks that are seeking or struggling, have obstacles, have adversity. And one of our programs is called the Summer Arts Workshop. And this is a summer program that we partner with a school in East Los Angeles called Dolores Mission School. And the big focus of this program is to focus on positive youth development using the art. So we did invite the kids to the campus, and they would spend a week with our graduate students creating this cumulative art project that was really about their identity, their culture, how they saw themselves in the world. It's really beautiful. We've been doing it since 2007. And so when COVID hit, we knew that we definitely needed to do this program, despite having it be online, having the anxiety, stress that these kids were enduring because of the pandemic and systemic racism. It was really important that we facilitate the program. So Amber and I got together a team, and we transitioned the program to be online. And because it was online, we weren't paying a chunk of money to bus the kids to our campus, we decided that we would expand the program and offer it to another school, and also to a school that was in a juvenile hall detention center. And so I don't want to take up too much more time. I can let Amber share as well, but it was some of the key findings were that it really promoted a lot of access where maybe there wasn't before, and maybe we can go into that a little bit more. But Amber?
Sure.
Thank you, Jessica, Dr. Bianchi.
My name is Amber, and Amber Cromwell, and I am a supervisor in the Helen B. Land Garden Art Therapy Clinic at LMU. And I will just hop on that conversation about what our chapter is mostly about is adapting. And one of the things is that we think so much about mentorship, like mentorship from the directors, mentorship from the graduate students, and the peer mentorship, because I think there's like a magic that happens during this week-long event. It always just completely amazes us that how like these little nugget of relationships form during the week-long. And so we really had to shift and think about how are you going to do that in the virtual space. And there's a major element of choice in our program. So we thought a lot about breakout rooms and letting the students kind of guide what they would like to explore in their art making. During the week long, we would have sort of workshops, and you could kind of go wherever you felt inclined to go. And we tried to do that a lot with the breakout rooms, and figure out ways that we can have the more individual one-on-one relationships, even in the big group. And, we experienced a lot of technical difficulties, especially when we were working with Central Juvenile Hall, where we anticipated how this was going to look. And we actually found out that they were not allowed to have their screens on. We were not actually allowed to see the students or the art. They could see us, but we could not see them. And that was so interesting. And actually, one would think that as a huge challenge, but we were really able to overcome that in really interesting ways. I think mostly by just being very present and actually listening to the descriptions of the art. And it was really helpful, actually, in taking away any projection or bias that you might have when looking at art. So that was really interesting.
Thank you, Amber. And as the editor, I had so much fun thinking about what it would be like for me as an art therapist delivering services without being able to see them. And I was so kind of in awe of, really the title Innovative Virtual Groups for today's panel applies to all of you authors, but that really came to mind. And we have some clients who are visually impaired, and it really helped me have some empathy for them, and even to wonder, again, the voice being so key to that relationship. So it really, really turned some thinking on our heads with your chapter. So thank you. Let's go to Sara. And I'm quite thrilled Sara did some very interesting group work as well to share with her mentor, Kate Colley, who's here as a participant today. Go for it, Sara.
Hi, nice to meet everybody here. And really amazing just hearing about all of your work too. It was such an interesting time in history, the beginning of COVID, and just to see how everybody kind of problem solved that time and came up with some similar solutions to me is really interesting. So myself, I'm an art therapist, and I work at BC Cancer, which is a cancer center which provides support services across British Columbia. I have a part-time position. So when I began in 2010 working there, I was given the mandate of working with everybody in the province. And so it was kind of up to me to figure out how to reach everybody provincially. So some of my early work kind of included using like video conferencing technology and like traveling to some of the different centers. But then I was introduced to Kate Colley, who was working in a cancer center in Edmonton, Alberta at the time. And she's one of the pioneers in digital and distance art therapy, had begun doing this work and this research in the 1990s. So I co-wrote this chapter with her. The beginning of it kind of talks more about the history of her work and some of the amazing things that she did in the late 90s. And then it kind of talks about how when we first met in 2012, we decided that we would kind of develop a way of doing art therapy together in a chat room on this website called Cancer Chat Canada. So we did a lot of work, figuring out different techniques for art therapy in a chat room. So when COVID hit, we had a bit of a leg up because we had all of these different ways that we were working already. But then of course the challenge was to figure out how to move everything on Zoom. But what I found is that I was able to quite easily take what I was doing in the chat room and move it onto Zoom. So I found there was one format that worked really well in which we would kind of meet together where we would chat together. And then at the end of the group, I would give everybody an art homework assignment. And this is kind of something that I ended up doing in my Zoom group. So a lot of you have talked about having art studio groups, and I definitely did some art making during our time together with the cancer patients that I was seeing. But a lot of them found what was most helpful was this art homework assignment, where I would give them this idea and they would have the whole week to kind of come up with a project on their own. And then they would submit a picture of what they had made during that week. And then I would put it into a PowerPoint presentation. And then we would kind of look through everybody's pictures the next session. So it ended up being this really neat finding that like working in this way kind of opened up their art studio to their home and to their lives outside of the weekly session. So lots of neat findings like that that we occurred and that occurred during that time together. Yeah, I think that's all for me for now.
Thank you very much, Sara. Great. Okay, let's dive into any observations, questions, comments, including from the authors. Feel
There's
free
a
to.
question in the chat.
Sure.
The question is, based on what Carolyn Treadon was discussing, what do you find to be the most effective way to address a rupture or change in the group dynamics? Example, new member arriving or leaving, changing facilitators.
Carolyn, do you feel like addressing that?
I think actually I'm going to pass that on to Sheila, who is
Sure.
our students navigate this as their supervisor.
And I would say, Hannah, also let's focus it on the virtual aspect. In what way, Sheila, might you address it differently than or the same as you might in a physical group setting?
Yeah. In the virtual space, we notice there's a lot more of that like coming and going because they're not closed groups per se, they're just open spaces.
Yeah.
And so it turns into that sometimes it's more like the person that has the anxieties about people coming and going. So being able to talk with the leads, and we have it set up where I talk with them every week, at a set time, we always meet and we're like, what's come up this week? And so that kind of helps kind of cushion and contextualize some of the stuff that happens in group. For example, some of the group members started to be by group, I'm now shifting words, but like in the studio participants, they've become anxious at learning that certain students were graduating and no longer going to be leads. And what's going to happen then? Is it going to close? Like, I've been attending studios now for a year. What do we do? Now my life is missing this thing. And so being able to talk about that with the leads on the side and then having them take those discussions back to their studios in their own words helps. So more conversation, more communication about what's going on. Mm-hmm. Introducing facilitators, pretty much like what I would have done at a hospital, where if I'm leaving when I was going to leave on maternity leave, coming in with the person who's going to replace me and go like, this is the next person, right? Like their things, their studios will come up in 2 weeks. You're going to get a week break. And those studios will be different in this way. Hear about it from them, get to meet them a little bit, get a sense for, who they are. And they could attend them if they want to, or ignore them. You're not being forced to do this. So yeah, I think it's about the short of it.
Thank you. More conversation, connection, those relationships. It feels a bit like we have to work a little bit harder to keep those relationships or to build them virtually, at least for me and my groups. Yeah. I have, of course, a million questions, but does anyone else have a question you'd like to leave? This is a great opportunity here. I enjoyed talking with last week's panel about this idea of the art materials and our clients, participants, patients, however you choose to call them, having to provide them, except in certain situations, some of you being pretty innovative in COVID and delivering them to them. In our clinic, we really are quite global, so we couldn't mail things. And so I'm wondering if anyone could share, any of the authors can share what that feels like. It used to be a bit of a gift that we could sort of seduce our clients a little bit with the art materials. What are your experiences with that?
I think for us, it was really being innovative and thinking out of the box of what could be viewed as an art material, what could be used and repurposed. Especially grad students are often not that much different than some of the clientele we work with and are scraping by to make ends meet. And even in educating and using creativity in the classroom, we have to think outside of the box, and teaching them to do that from the beginning of their education helps them develop that ability to carry that into their professional work as well.
Yeah. Their attunement with the needs of the client is a little bit more present, isn't it? There's no kiln access. There's there's no place to make a mess with clay necessarily. Yeah.
I wanted to just quickly share that I saw students doing this when they had to shift some of their internship experiences to telehealth. And one student was sharing that they were working with a client and they were having their client make sculptures out of the clothes in their room.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, it was just really great. And one other thing I wanted to bring up to see if any of the other authors could talk about this, because it reminded me of it with the issue of, I don't want to call it an issue, but the interesting experience of having the cameras off and not seeing the artwork is being in spaces that were not confidential during COVID and not being able to have conversation because of who was sharing the room. And, if anyone found that they needed to rely on chat or, how did they navigate that either in supervision or open studio? I was just curious if any of the other authors had any experiences with that they wanted to share.
I can share a little bit, and Amber, feel free to jump in. But when we were working in the juvenile hall, there was quite a bit of, regulation that we had to adhere to, and we couldn't see the kids, and they were also there with their staff, the staff that kind of monitor them. And initially, we were a bit hesitant of that. However, there were some opportunities for the staff to observe the kids in a really different way. The kids shared some vulnerability that maybe the staff had not seen before, and those relationships, I think, actually deepened just a little bit. We had to be very careful about how deep to go with our processing. And at times, some of the staff would make really well-intended comments like, "Oh, that's so pretty," right? And so, we would have to kind of counter that with, "And look how you're doing this, and how do you feel about this?" But I think that, as I was saying earlier, there was really a lot of access that was granted in this space. Do you want to add anything, Amber?
Oh, just that we had kind of debriefed and discussed how it kind of brings up the possibility of maybe even like staff training to support the process. That would be something moving forward we thought about. That could be really helpful for the staff who are involved and the youth.
You were really doing informal training along the way. And it reminds me of family therapy in that what we're learning in our clinic is that there's a lot more involvement with the parent having to do a bit more training of the parent, or in a way that in family therapy, when they're in the same physical space, that doesn't happen. It's a different way of engaging with the parent. And Catherine Snyder will be joining us next for the next panel, or the fourth panel. And those of you interested in that dynamic should certainly come to that one. But yeah, thanks, Amber and Jessica. Very interesting stuff. And I think that addressed your question a little bit, Brittany, about respecting privacy, how to overcome some of those barriers. And again, I think innovation is really the way, wondering how to do that, but knowing where your client is sitting and being respectful with your preparation, with your prompts, helping them troubleshoot who's in their environment. I mean, there's basic technical things, of course, like headsets, but beyond that, it's very much a relationship based, what's going to work for them and what's legal and ethical on your end. And Sarah, I wondered if you had some thoughts about this, because you've certainly been through a lot more of this with the chats and other forms, not video based.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I found that as the weeks went on, I would have to add more and more guidelines to my group, some things that we didn't quite consider when we started, that suddenly, like I remember all of a sudden one session, somebody was tuning in from while they were getting their chemo treatments, and she had her video on, so she was on video. So we had to kind of say, okay, actually we're going to add a guideline here that you need to be in a safe and private space to tune into the session. And there was another session where, somebody was taking pictures of the PowerPoint presentation that I put. So they were kind of screen grabbing everybody's images from our presentation. So I also had to add another guideline that there's absolutely no recording of any kind allowed. So there definitely ended up being a lot more kind of confidentiality kind of things to think about. But yeah, definitely a learning process. And we discovered that everybody was really respectful. It's just like we're all doing something new for the first time. So just kind of figuring out this new kind of code of conduct to follow by.
It's very humbling for those of us with many years of experience doing face-to-face work.
Yeah,
it's truly tapping into some growth.
For sure, a huge learning curve right there.
Yeah. So we have a little bit more time. Other questions? I love to see the questions and answers flowing through the chat. Thank you for staying up late. Asta is based in India right now. Any other exciting themes that came up in the talk that any of the authors would like to mention? Or
I think one of the things that really came to the forefront for us in hosting some of the virtual open studios, when you're face to face and you have a safety risk, or you have somebody who is in crisis, even though it's for wellness and not mental health, the physicality allows you to have intervention. And one of the things that became very pertinent for us was as faculty and also training the studio leads of how to recognize that and how to seek help for somebody who may be a safety risk to themselves or somebody else, and knowing where those access points are both within the US and abroad, because we have international participation. And that adds an extra layer of ethical awareness that not everybody, I think, we had in our conscious awareness prior, because we didn't exist in this virtual realm.
Yes, that's a huge piece, and to me, it's a lot more interesting than the legal pieces around whether our insurance covers us in the UK or this, that, and other thing. While that's still important, the piece around the client safety has been a huge discussion point for us, and at the virtual art therapy clinic, because we see clients from so many other places, and what we found is that the intake process has needed to be so much more thorough, and I believe we wrote about that in one of the chapters. Just that intake, especially if it's a student art therapist leading, there has to be a real thoroughness around where the client is at, not only geographically, but do they have access to resources there should they need them, and how do we get access to those resources if they should need it. So the rare time that we've needed to really put a safety plan in place, it's been a bit of a rude awakening, because we can't send our local police over to their house, right? And is the address and phone number they gave us what's possible? Maybe you could, Sarah, if you could please mute Marnie. So yes, thank you for bringing up that important topic. So, and I guess that's a little bit like the theme we were talking about with groups. It's almost like more conversation needed to bring the group, the community together, and to come to a level of trust and understanding that this is all working. And it is more work, I think, for us. It's more work for them too. And the outcome can be even more thrilling. Some of our clients in other regions and countries that would just never seek art therapy if it wasn't online. It wouldn't even be possible for them. And they've gotten the opportunity to do so.
That's one thing I just wanted to say very quickly is there's the access, and it is a lot of work, Michelle, for clients and participants, and then also for students, and then also for educators. You know, one of the things that a lot of, I want to say, parents and students became very upset with, if you're not already an online program, and programs that had to go online because of COVID, they were thinking they were not getting a good education, or thinking that teachers were quote unquote slacking. And in some cases, maybe that was true, or maybe it's just that they weren't supported to provide what they needed to provide. But in reality, it takes a lot more time and a lot more to put into an online program than it does not an online program. So for those of you at Edinburgh, I bow to you.
Yes.
And other programs that are online, I bow to you.
Yes.
It is a ton of work on the curriculum coordinator and the educator that has to curate and build those platforms.
Yeah.
And you have to do it with a lot of quality matter and a lot of. So yes, there's a lot that goes into it.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Yes, Dr. Peña was really a mentor for me. I would send her the most random questions back in 2016 when I was setting up curriculum, because we're all online now. And so when COVID hit, we weren't stretching with curriculum, but we were stretching with our clinic and our online clients. And she was already quite grounded and very creative in so many ways. So you are all lucky that get to work with her at Edinburgh. So my wonderful moderator is letting me know that it is time for the wheel of gifting a copy to one of our attendees. So Sara, I will pass you the torch.
Yeah, sure. So as most of you know, every attendee is entered into a draw to win a copy of our book. So I put everyone's names into this really fun, like, spin the wheel game. So I've drawn a winner. So the lucky recipient is Lenore Walker is the winner. So congratulations, Lenore. I will be contacting you via email after the panel, and we will set up a way to deliver that to you.
Wonderful. I would like to thank the authors tremendously for your time, and all of you that attended. Thanks. And the recording will be available to the authors at some point if you'd like to share with your students or family. You'll just contact Sara and she'll arrange to get you that starting tomorrow probably. And if anyone would like to stay on for 10 more minutes, authors, please. And Dr. Kate Colley is here with us, so you might get to chat with her if you're willing to stay on for 10 more minutes. Great. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on CiiAT. So nice to see you.
It's really exciting to see so many lovely people I know and care about doing great work. I'm excited about this.
We're missing you on this continent, but glad you're over there doing good things.
Thank you. Thank you. Same here. And congratulations.
Thanks.
Sure.